Next, we have Isabella and Rhiannon. They are both published authors, published by Not a Cult Publishing, but also have experience with self-publishing. So they'll be kind of talking about all of that and just a little bit more about both of them. Isabella is an artist, poet, and author based in LA. She self-published her first book, 7,300 Days, which sold over 5,000 copies in its first year, before getting a creative writing degree at University of Southern California. Last year, Isabella published her second book, Hours Inside Out, with LA-based press called Not a Cult. Sorry, I'm just adding more people in. Next, we have Rhiannon as well, she is also an LA-based poet whose work has been published by Teen Vogue and C Magazine. As a YoungArts Finalist in spoken word, she was nominated for the Presidential Scholar of Arts and was the Youth Poet Laureate of Los Angeles in 2016, is currently studying literature at UCLA. Her books, Branches and Grocery List Poems, are also published through Not a Cult, and today both ladies will be talking about their experiences with publishing and all that jazz. So welcome, you guys.
Hello. We are just waiting on Rhi because she didn't get the Zoom link from her Eventbrite for some odd reason. So just trying to help a sister out. And that is all. Could we take like 5 minutes to just wait for her?
I can send it to her if you
That
want.
would be amazing.
And maybe if you want to, I know I gave a little background, but maybe you could just talk a little bit more about your experience as a writer before we get into the publishing stuff.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, if you could just send that to Rhi, that would be so helpful. Hello, everyone. I'm Isabella. I, as Sophie so eloquently put it, first, before anything, would like to just send so much gratitude for Unpublished and Luna for holding this space. It is so nice to connect with people right now during this time. Oh, it's a lifesaver. It's been a really weird year to be a writer, especially because I actually put a book out in 2020 amid a global pandemic, which you could imagine was a little wild. So it's really, really nice to have these conversations surrounding what it is to be a writer right now. And especially with isolation, being a writer as a profession, it is a generally lonely gig. It's you, your pen, and your paper. So community is so important. Having the conversation about how do we move on during this time? What do we talk about? So before I want to start this conversation, I would love if everyone submitted to the chat what resources and knowledge they would like to gain from this. Are you trying to self-publish? Are you trying to go the academic route and be seen in that like lit crit vibe? So just send it there. Anything and everything, if I didn't mention it, just please say, just because I want to make sure that the resources and the information that I'm providing are useful for you. Because what are we doing here? We're just trying to help each other learn and grow. I have a big background in self-publishing and also just published with a press, so I have that duality. But Rhi is also, she works with a press, so she has a lot of resources and information to help with that. We want to self-publish. Love that. So yeah, I'm just gonna wait for some of those questions to come in so that I can gear that information. And also
I just gotta give a shout out, Isabella. We're in the same.
Oh yes, I am fully rocking my Luna Collective's hoodie. It is so comfy, and got it last night. And
I sent her the link as well, so she should be coming in soon as she comes in.
Incredible. Self-publish. I'm seeing mostly everyone is looking for information surrounding self-publishing. That's really helpful. Oh my gosh, you have 1,300 days. I love that. That's really cute. I'm moving right now, and I went to pull, because Rhi and I want to read a poem for you, and I went to go pull a book from my bookshelf, and it's just this hollow existence over here. So love to see it. Okay, so I'm feeling like everyone is looking to self-publish. So that's really, really great to know, because there are definitely pros and cons to each track. And also, those aren't the only two tracks that exist. There's so much out there right now that you can do. So yeah, I'm just going to begin. I'm really wondering where Rhi is.
Yeah, I sent it to her. I don't know if you want to text her, but you're totally welcome to do your thing.
Thank you, Sophie. I love how everyone is like, I want to self-publish, but also, how do I get out of my own way? And I'm like, feel that. I'm there with you. And distraction too. That's big. Did you text it to her or did you email it to her?
I DM'd it to her because I thought that would be fastest. She wants to check that.
I think she's getting it. Okay, well, while we wait for Ree, I just want to take a minute to talk about distraction. Sophie, she's asking if you could text it to her. Do you have her number?
No, but if you send it to me, I'll text it to her.
I got you right now. Okay, so distraction. I actually talked about my friend about this very topic with my friend, for anyone who's trying to self-publish or even work on a manuscript right now. And because I haven't been experiencing for the first time what it is to feel writer's block. And I was asking Siafi, she's like one of the most spiritual people I've ever met in my life. Like, what is writer's block to you? What is that experience? And she said it so well. She said, distraction. That is what writer's block is. And I've never heard someone so eloquently describe the experience of what it is to be inundated with constant information being thrown at us. And when you're trying to write and compose and fully fill your mind like a room almost with ideas, distraction is, it ruins that experience. So if you are feeling distracted and blocked at the same time, try to focus on what it is to limit those distractions as best as possible. She says that when she's working on scripts, she literally puts her phone in a completely different room and doesn't even think that it's like a real thing that exists. And I thought that was really good and interesting for anyone who's trying to break through that right now, because it's huge. And 2020 was the year of distraction. So hi, Ree.
There she is.
She's here. She has arrived. Honestly, fashionably late. We can't.
I wrote my thesis on technology, but I guess I didn't do it good enough. Hi guys, I'm sorry I'm late. It's very nice to see all of your icons.
Okay, well, they already introduced us, so that like completely eliminates that from our doc. So I just want to jump into asking you questions, talking about publishing. I already asked the audience, the people, the humans, what they're currently working on, what they're looking for information. And a lot of people are looking to self-publish, but also we do have people who would like to publish as well. So that's very great for the conversation we have planned for today.
Yeah, that's great. Isabella and I were talking for like a full hour before we were late to this Zoom call. So we have lots of material to cover. Do you want to like read some poems first though?
We could, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Oh, open it up, Isabella.
Okay.
Open up the pit.
All right, well, I'm just going to read a poem so that we can get rooted in this moment and take a big exhale. I am reading a poem from Hours Inside Out called Tell Me Again About the Summer We Had Spaghetti Lakes, and it's about remembering summer from a rainy wintry day. I remember walking home with eyes closed and hitting a pole, climbing a fence with my panties in a ball, walking through grass and clinging to the wall, and counting feet under a bathroom stall, and hearing my father speak Danish and feeling it, never knowing what was inside, rollerblades too big, falling on the sidewalk etched with our names. Remember memory itself, how once it was looking out the window, all before learning the meaning of color by wearing black in the sun and absorbing and pulling blueberries out of my nose and yelling the sunroof and carving with my fingernails into trees, and remember July like a well-waxed seat, sunlight pulling across your torso, and waking up to toast and cigars and war movies and lilies and the TV echoing through me. Hell yeah, your
Snaps,
turn.
virtual snaps. Okay, I'm gonna put a link to Isabella's beautiful book in the chat, just so everybody can see the work. And I'm going to read something from the book that I'm currently working on, which is called Grocery List Poems, and it's going to be really cute. And I haven't read this one to anybody but my cats before, so. And it is a sonnet. On the first day of the general strike in Hollywood, we filled the streets like stitches in blankets, like sap in maple trees, like breath in wind, like hammocks, like a heart, like paper plates after we made the Whole Foods a kitchen and split a country club into breakfast tables. And some of us grabbed another biscuit, some of us napped, some read romance novels as the sun on our skin sugared to memory so we would never settle for workday fluorescence. And the kids aimed themselves and rolled down a blood emerald hill on the golf course, worlds turning around them. On this first day, this dirt began to leach the old poisons, dreaming what else it could be. Thank you. Yay.
Very excited for that book to come
Cool.
out. I
Okay.
also linked your book that is going to come out.
Yeah, in June, which is 1,000 years from now.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
Well,
let's
jump into these questions, Rhi.
So Isabella.
Yes.
Isabella.
That's my name. Sometimes.
Isabella. What you put 7,300 Days Out, which was your first self-published collection of poems. You put that out, you were writing it when you were 18, you put it out when you were 19. What was it like to be your own editor? Like, how could you tell when those poems were cooked and ready to eat?
Yes. So publishing a book from my bedroom when I was 18, I actually wrote it when I was 18, without ever having experienced a workshop, without ever really putting my writing in anything other than my friends' magazines. I fully was functioning off of this thing that we call intuition. I followed it from the minute that I thought of writing that book to the second that it was over. But with that being said, it was actually quite hard to both write and edit a book completely by myself, because I definitely missed errors and I missed mistakes when I go back and read it. So my biggest piece of advice for anyone who is looking to self-publish is utilize your community and try your best to find a resource where you could share your writing with people. And I know that sometimes when you first approach it, you're like, well, I don't have the money for this, but try your best to think about what works best for your circumstance. And if there are people in your community who would be willing to help you and see it from another perspective, because it is very helpful to have an editor and to have someone looking at your work and being like, no, you misspelled that word, like, see this right here. So yeah.
Yeah, or even just not in like a full, structured editorial sense, but just like, do you have like a group of friends who are also writing or also doing their own little creative projects that you can just show your work to, and bounce around. I really feel like that's the most important thing, especially for teenage writers or people who are just, beginning to come into themselves and beginning to develop a practice. Like you need friends,
a community. It's very important. I'm going to ask you a question now. So you're writing a book with a press right now, and you have been working on it for, I believe, 2 to 3 years now. Is that a correct timeline? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think
so how do you combat writer's block and stagnation when you're working with a deadline and working with a press?
My kitten is crawling all over my desk right now. She would like to say hello. Okay, so for working on a deadline, so it's I have been working on this book. I think I got the idea for it my sophomore year of college, which was like
Oh my God, like either 3 or 4 years ago now, I don't remember. I keep thinking about things that happened in 2019 and I'm like, wow, that's so crazy. That was almost a whole year ago. I was like, no, it was almost 2 years ago. We were just in fine all the time. But no, this book was supposed to come out like multiple times before. Like this book was supposed to come out in like November 2018. It was supposed to come out June 2020. It was supposed to come out like a while before this, and I kept pushing the deadline back because it wasn't, it just wasn't done yet. And luckily, like I would, ask for an extension when like the deadline was still flexible, but like, thinking about like, how do you know when your own poems are done, and ready to be seen by other people? It wasn't at that point yet. So like I needed that extra time. Now that I do have a real deadline and like this manuscript is like actually for real due, like by the end of next month, allegedly, dealing with writer's block on it. I don't know. I feel like writer's block is a misnomer in a lot of ways. For me, whenever it's very rare, just speaking off like my own experience, it's very rare that I'm like at a loss for words. It's not that I can't articulate what I'm thinking about. It's just that I haven't thought about the thing long enough yet.
Yeah.
I'm a really slow writer. I will think about like an idea for a poem sometimes for like a full year before even just like writing notes down for it. It'll just be like percolating.
Yeah.
So if, when I'm at like a thinking block, that's the point where like it's time to, watch a movie or read a book or listen to an album that I feel is like tangential to whatever I'm trying to write about. That's when it's time to go for like a bunch of really long walks without my phone and just like look at the houses and look at the trees. And also exercise. I feel exercise is really important. Especially if you are, beginning to develop your process and your practice as like a young writer. Writing is a very hunched over, thinky, stationary activity. And you need to be able to like use the rest of your body. Like my only fitness goal is to counteract the damage that I do to myself sitting at a desk. With working, with like a wider, with an actual press on a deadline, it's not just my deadline. My editor has a deadline, the proofreaders have a deadline, the distribution center has a deadline. Which also, makes me want to dedicate as much time and energy to the thing, as possible, because if I'm late, it means everybody's late.
Yeah, for sure.
And, working in publishing and also being a published writer is very interesting because I get to see both sides of it, whereas like sometimes I'm the poet being hunted down and sometimes I'm the person hunting down the poet to like beg them to fucking email me back, duality.
There is a question in the chat, which I think is really good. It says, are there, because something that like you mentioned, even though you have a book coming out, you already have another book out, Branches, which you wrote when we were basically around the same age when we both put those books out. And it says, are there things you wish you could change now about your works and what you would tell your younger self about those works? I think that's a really good question and it kind of relates to your question you wanted to ask me, if you want to ask that, and we could kind of like play with those two questions.
Yeah, no, well, just like what, specifically for Isabella, because Isabella experienced such like a massive success with self-published work at a very young age, before being integrated into like, any kind of like literary education workshop. Like you were a teenager in your bedroom, like rocketing up, which is great. But then like, how do you push yourself to grow more if, you've already been rewarded at such a high level, at this like psychological basis? Like, how do you not just keep writing the same poems that you were writing when you were 18?
Yeah.
And I feel like this is all.
Yeah. I think that really
together
runs parallel to what would you tell your younger self, because when I first found out that 7,300 Days had sold over 10,000 copies worldwide within the first year, I remember both feeling so overwhelmed, but also had this false sense that anything that I would do would work and be successful. And I went into the world being like, I'm going to publish all the books and all the books are going to be great. And I'm just going to keep going. And it's like, that's just not how it works. Like sometimes you publish a book in a global pandemic and like people are just inundated with trauma and like trying to just freaking drink water and go to the bathroom. So something I would tell my younger self is constantly remind yourself of why it is you are an artist and stay connected to that purpose as best as possible, because no matter what capitalistic definitions of success come from your artistic endeavors, it's all about why you are putting that pen to paper and what it means to write that stanza and write that line. Like the moment I remind myself of that is the moment that I free myself of all limitations. And yeah, the thought of like, how do you push yourself to grow is, because at this point I have both self-published and I have published with the press, which both have pros and cons. And with self-publishing, you have to push yourself constantly. You are your own goalkeeper. You are your own intention setter. Like you are that person, and you have to wake up every day being like, I can do this and I will do this. I'm going to promote it and I don't know what's going to happen. 10 people could read it or 10,000 people could read it, and it's not about that outcome. And the only way that I continually pushed myself to grow was to just say, hey, I have an idea, I have a dream, I'm going to go for it. No inhibitions, just charge it, see what happens. Then when it happens, we'll see what happens and keep going. I don't know if that answers the question, but those are just my thoughts.
No, absolutely. So I had an interesting opportunity because my first book, Branches, which came out when I was 19, it was with an independent press, but it didn't go so well. Like I would have been better off if I just self-published it. There was very little, the kind of institutional support that you should ask for and that you deserve when you are publishing with an actual publisher was just not there at all.
Yeah.
You know, for me as a teenager, and I didn't know anybody who'd published a book before, so I didn't know what to expect, which is just another reason why, like, man, if you haven't had a pap smear yet, there's no reason for you to have a book contract. You know, like you need to just be growing. Like you should just be focusing on yourself and like making friends with other writers and growing, and like, I'm not going to say finding your voice because it's corny, but you know, just be growing, be working on your stuff and be finding your favorite books. But I had an interesting opportunity where like I got the rights back to my first book, and then I published a second edition with the press that's doing my second book. That's doing, sorry, my cats are going crazy. That's doing grocery list poems. So I was actually able to go back and edit my teenage poems, and it was like so healing and rejuvenating, and like I knew exactly what direction to take it in. But that's really like the thing, you know, we have these very toxic ideas of success, especially for writers, especially in the poetry world.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, well, success looks like having a book really young. You know, success, like, you know, when I was 17, I was like, all I wanted was like a book with a real press, you know, and like some other stuff. Right. But like the idea of like a successful writer to me was like somebody with like a full published book and I don't know what else, because I'm in the 11th grade. And it's so much wider than that, and it's so much bigger than that. And especially, you know, I don't want to say that like I regret publishing a book really young, because I'm trying to like live mindfully and stuff and just take my lessons where I can get them. But like this is something that I talk about with the teenagers that I mentor, which is that like you kind of want to put your debut book off as long as possible. You want to build experience. You want to know exactly how you put a book together so that when you read the book back a few years later, you know, there's not all of these other things, you know, that you want to fix. You also want to stay eligible for, like, this is a real trick. You want to stay eligible for those emerging writer contests and scholarships and fellowships as long as possible, because the requirement, you know, for all of these emerging writer contests is that like you have not published a book yet. Like you can have chapbooks out, you can have self-published things out, which you should absolutely do to build experience of knowing how to put poems together, you know, across 50 pages, across 100 pages, to know how like ideas flow and evolve across the course of a book. But save your debut for when you know that you're going to be supported by like a real press with a real foundation, and that you're going to be submitted for all of the debut awards, that like the machine's going to be working in your favor.
Absolutely.
Sorry, that was long.
Sophie and Rebecca, I know we're at that 20-minute, we're past the 20-minute mark by now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you got, there's a bunch of questions in the chat, but I know you have more questions for one another. So you guys are welcome. Like, we're okay to go over a little bit too. It's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to.
I feel like you guys are in a flow.
There are a lot of questions like scrolling up.
If you want, I can read them through, so you guys don't have to like keep scrolling through.
That would be beautiful.
Start from the
I'm down.
top.
I'm down for the Q&A. Like,
Cool. Okay, we'll start off with, what is something you wish you knew before self-publishing that no one told you?
So many things. I wish I knew that. Okay, because this is a big thing that I don't think I want people to be aware of, but also is something to be aware of, because it's like, fuck everyone really having an opinion on what you're gonna like be publishing, but at the same time, people are going to read your book. People are going to fully buy your book and read it, and that is not me to say that you should limit your experience, limit your narrative, and sculpt your narrative based on what the fact that people are going to buy it and read it. But also just be aware of that. Be aware of getting a random text message from someone you knew in 10th grade being like, hey, I bought your book and I read it and I shared it with my little sister and also my family. And you're gonna be like, okay, I hope you enjoyed me talking about my sexual experiences when I was 15 years old. Like, that just happens. So yeah, your community is a lot more powerful than you think it is. And when you promote yourself and your parents promote you, people will read your stuff.
Awesome. And so we have another question asking, how do you pitch your idea to publishers?
Ooh, okay. I have a lot to say about this, because I had to pitch my own books, and then I also spent a lot of time writing grant applications for my senior thesis at UCLA in the last couple of years. So you need to have like this was like the real change and shift that I noticed, now looking back at myself, like growing as a writer, in the years around college, where it's like my book was the ideas that I had for books, right? Or like little zines or chapbooks or whatever I was like, copying out at Staples. It shifted from just being like, okay, these are all of the poems that I wrote, in the last month, versus, okay, these are all of the poems that are about weather. These are all the poems that are about I don't know, going to school. Like, these are all the recipe poems, they're organized around like a concept, as opposed to just being everything that I had made recently and just throwing it together, and then not knowing what order to put it on. So you need to have like a strong concept for your writing. I think that's really important. And I also say this because I'm the person who reads through all the submissions and all the manuscripts that get sent to us at Nautical. And I have to next month, I'm going to be going through like 600, samples of poetry books. And it's like the people who stand out, especially when I'm reading them, just over and over and over again, right? The people who stand out are the ones who are confident in their work. Like, you can't be writing in your cover letter like, oh, I'm not sure about this. You can't be self-deprecating yourself. You can't be self-deprecating in front of someone that you're trying to impress. So you need to be confident in your work. You need to have a strong concept. And I want to see that you're thinking about like form and content, where it's not like you're thinking about how the poems look on the page, thinking like just for poetry, just for like my own, position as like a staff submissions reader. But being able to articulate why you're writing these poems in a certain way is very important. And if you don't have that yet, that's completely okay. Just like be reading more and be reading as much, I think, contemporary poetry as you can, or contemporary writing in whatever genre that you're working in. You need to know how other people are working.
Yeah, facts. That was great.
Good answer. We have a question from Isabel, which actually, Isabella, you kind of mentioned this in your last question and answer, but how do you overcome having your feelings out there when people you know can read them? I get so embarrassed.
Yes. Well, that's actually a really incredible question, because Hours Inside Out is actually an exploration of, and I just want to say trigger warning, but an exploration of my experience with sexual assault and how I overcame silence and stagnation and just my own internal shame that I had just taken on and taken on and taken on. And I will say that the main thing that I reminded myself while writing this collection and remembering the experience of publishing 7,300 days and having that weird neighbor read my book was, this is my narrative. This is my voice. This is my experience. And I have to honor that, because what do I have if I don't have my truth? So I would say that yes, it is okay and totally valid to have emotions come up surrounding embarrassment and fear, because fear is there to protect you. But really think about what it means to step into that truth and step into that narrative. And I'm not saying like go out there and just blow it all, because like say it all just because that's your truth. But if it's in line with the story you're constructing, then say it and stand strong and try your best. And I know Ree will have thoughts surrounding this as well.
Yes, well, I'm just thinking of something that you told me like last July when I was starting to really get into it with, drafting this book of just like, remember, you still have to go home. You still like, this is probably the opposite of what you were just saying, but like the dialectics of it, because I was like, oh man, I'm going to write all these poems where I'm like so explicit and I'm so like, not holding anything back. And you were like, well, you still have to go home.
Yeah.
Like you can't just put everything on the line and exploit yourself and exploit your feelings for the work, for the benefit of strangers, but you still have to go home and explain yourself. And that helped a lot. And also I want to say with Hours Inside Out, which is like fantastic and very, very fucking like, sorry I cursed, smart and emotionally intelligent with just how you write it down. Because if you just read the book through, we talked about this a lot. I remember when you were drafting and putting these poems together, if you just read the book through, and you do not already have experience, with Isabella's experiences, you might read it through and just be like, that was cool. Like, that was a cool book. But like, when it connects to something in your own life that you already know the secret history of, because like those poems are so within that world, you're within the scene. You're not standing outside the scene pointing at it and being like, look at like what I was doing because of this. Because you're so in it, that also acts as like a shield. Because it's like it's coded. It's all very coded. It's very impressionistic.
Sure. And that's like the fine line you have to walk as a writer. How willing are you to put yourself out there and like you're literally and figuratively bleed for your art, but also at the same time go home and protect yourself. Like it is a balance to strike, and it's important to have those conversations with yourself approaching your manuscript.
It's very difficult, and I'd say that like if you're on the fence, just hold off. Like you're in charge of what you're writing about. You're in charge of the form and content. You don't have to push yourself to do anything that you're not already comfortable with. And then I'll also say that I write composites all the time. Where I'm like so many of the poems and grocery list poems. First of all, like you can just make shit up. Like just make stuff up. Like I know it's poetry and like we think that we have to be working with like this like raw emotional truth all the time, but like if something sounds cool, then just say it, like as long as you're not like, I don't know, lying about somebody else's life or I don't know, like race baiting, like just it's okay if like the conversation didn't go exactly the same way, you know what I mean? And like working with composites is also great. Like I think there's like 2 poems in the book, where like someone close to me would read it and be able to be like, oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. But the rest of it, like, like this poem about a breakup is actually about 3 breakups put together. Like this poem about longing and being wary is actually about, like some shit that I went through at work, that I adapted into a romance narrative. Like have fun. Like,
Okay.
you don't have to tell, you just have to be honest. You don't have to tell the truth.
Wow. I'm gonna write that on my wall.
Hi.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
We have a question from Leah. Did you work with any organizations or magazines in college before you published your first book, Isabella? How did you gain authorship and credibility?
Amazing question. So did you work with any organizations or magazines? I have not yet stepped into the literary magazine space yet. I did publish a lot of my work through a magazine called The Messy Heads, which some of you may be familiar with, which was really cool because I got to kind of experiment with form. I started writing like longer, it was like, I would want to say it was kind of like an advice column that I had in my first magazine with her. And authorship credibility is huge. I still don't feel like I have that. I'm going to be really honest with you, but I know a lot of people in my community who see me from a more objective point of view will say, no, you've published 2 books. One of them sold 10,000 copies and one of them is with the press. But I just feel like I'm going to be working for that credible spot my whole life just because I don't know. I just don't, I feel like everyone here has credibility as an author. I mean, we're all writing, we're all telling stories all the time. But Reed, do you want to answer this question too? Because I know you have experience with literary magazines and you might.
Yeah, no, and I saw a question in the chat, like, how do you, Agnes, please, how do you meet other writers? How do you find writing communities? It really sucks right now because everybody's at the fuck home, and I'm really sorry, but like, this is terrible, and like, this is not like how things should normally be going. And like, being able to go to open mics when I was a teenager was so important to me, and just finding, like, you know, wherever you are, you don't have to be in like a big, you know, artsy city, just like finding some local library, some local poetry organization, just like getting together with your friends and having like a weekly writing workshop is so important. And like, it doesn't matter where you are or what is happening, you know, around you, there's always like some other kid, you know, with a journal and pen that you can hang out with.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And also, you know, like, I've seen so many more magazines in the last few years that are like explicitly geared towards young writers, including Luna Collective, including Unpublished Mag. And that's so great because like, I don't remember those happening when, you know, I was a teenager. It was all like, you're either getting published in the New Yorker or you're nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many things happening online, and if you don't see something that it like doesn't fit your vibe, just keep looking because the internet's huge and it's definitely out there.
I also have one piece of advice for this. I think a big way that I created a writers community was twofold. One, when I was at obviously USC, going to college is an insane privilege, which I thankfully my parents pushed me and I did, but it was in workshop and making friends with people in workshop. And I didn't know a single person when I first went into a workshop, and I made friends by just walking up to people after being like, yo, your poem today shook me. And then the second thing would be also just DMing people on Instagram. Like, if you read a poem that someone posts or someone's a writer and you read like an article, just reach out to them. Say, hey, I love your poem. It made me feel these things. I would love to share some of mine. Just intentional connection in that way.
I remember we met at a party. Like I got to the party and somebody was like, hey, you got to go talk to the other poet, and you were like wine drunk in one of the bedrooms reading, and I was like, well, this seems appropriate.
Yep. Fully wearing fishnets.
Yeah.
Sick.
We got a question from Angelica. What should we know about the legal end of self-publishing? That's a good one.
That's a very good one.
Yeah.
As far as legal, I'm just trying to go up to it. Legal end. So when I published my book, I published with Amazon, but now Amazon has changed it to KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing, and you own your rights to your work. You own well, that being said, like if you work with not editors, if you work with somebody who designs your cover, then you should write a contract up and you should say, I own this X, Y, and Z. There's examples online that you can just Google contract with book designer. So make sure you have your contracts in line, especially if you put illustrations in your book and work with illustrators. But in terms of your rights, you own your rights to your book when you publish with Amazon. And that's a really good thing to know, because it means that you're making more money when you self-publish because of that, because you're not working with a press who's like offering X, Y, and Z resources at hand. But still, you could probably correct me if I'm wrong, if I misspeak, but you still own your work when you publish with a press. You just don't own.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, listen, you own your work if you're just writing out Instagram captions and they're original work. Like as soon as it enters like any kind of domain, as soon as you put it out in the world, as soon as it has a paper trail, you're good. So
Yeah.
I say this to say, like, if you're a teen writer and you see like a corporation putting, you know, an original stanza that you know that you wrote on like a t-shirt and selling it, you can absolutely sue them and take them to court. Sorry, my cat is trying to pull out my computer charger.
Does that answer the question though? I hope that because the legal end, I hope that answered the complexity of that question. Okay, cool, sweet. And also something that I just want to say as well, connected to the legal end, is I get a lot of DMs of people asking me, how much does it cost to self-publish? And that, I don't know if people have that question. I'm just going to answer it very fast. If not, self-publishing is quote unquote free, does cost you time and resources. Resources being, are you connecting with people to help you create that? And how are you going to like trade labor in that way? So if you have anyone coming to you saying that it costs, especially if you publish with KDP, it's free. But if you have people coming at you saying like, it costs me $2,000 to self-publish, fact check that, see where that money is going. I don't know why that would, go on.
So that's actually, so there's a specific term. So there's, that would be a vanity press. And you can tell, you know, kind of the stratum that it's in because it's called a vanity press, you know, where it's basically like, they kind of exist for like middle-aged women who want to put out their memoirs.
Got it.
And they're like their own like little ring in the, oh my God. They're their own little ring in the publishing world, and you want to avoid them for the most part,
cool.
because they don't really exist for your benefit. Savannah Brown did originally self-publish her first book. I'm not sure if she paid for it or not. Well, I know that she paid, like she had illustrations and she had a cover design. You know, so there was that. But
there is a cost there unless you're friends.
But in terms of just like putting, like, I also really like lulu.com. I'm gonna put that in the chat description. This is the one that I recommend to the kids that I work with. It's a really customizable self-publishing platform. It's like the cheapest thing possible with the best quality, and I really like it.
Yeah, that was actually just asked. So it's really good that you're putting that resource up. Okay, do you want to continue with questions? I'm sorry, I like took over there and kind of slid a question in.
Yeah, there's another one from Leah again. Are there any things you wish you could change now about your works, and what would you tell your younger self?
Yeah,
I think we answered that earlier, right?
Yeah, we kind of answered that.
Oh, okay.
Cool. But how about we go to how and where do you meet other writers and find writing communities? Maybe I'll add on that, especially now during COVID.
Yeah. Rhi touched on like the open mic scene. I think now more than ever is taking advantage of online communities. And it's actually funny because Soph and I had a call like, I think like 3 days ago, where I was just like, dude, I'm having thoughts. I want to collaborate with people with my podcast, but I'm kind of at a roadblock. Like, how do I reach out to people? And then I just realized that I could just go to Luna Collective and just browse the many amazing people who have been featured there and unpublished and all the other magazines that exist out there. So if you are thirsty for writers, go to your online resources. Like go to magazines, go to all the places where people's beautiful work is published, and then reach out to those artists and, I don't know, try to set up a call, because that's like the way that I have connected with people the most, just being like, let's grab coffee. So evolve that concept and say, let's talk on the phone. Like, let's just literally look at each other for an hour and see what happens. Priya, I feel like, do you want to add on to that? Or I feel like we answered that one a little bit.
Yeah, no, and I'll say just like, you know, we all have this impulse towards networking and success and ideals of success and stuff, but like hang out with people whose work that you like, and who you think are cool, not people who you think are gonna like give you shine and make you successful, you know?
Really great piece of advice.
Like that's like, I know everybody in here has like a perfectly pure heart and would never, you know, think of like leading with their ego in such a way, but it is
I've definitely done that, Ree. Call me out.
It's worth saying. And also I'll say like, somebody asked earlier, like, what would you change about, you know, past published works? And I'll say like, I think that impulse is really common, of just like being nervous to put out a final draft of something, to, you know, put something concrete and unchangeable out in the world, because like you're worried about like, well, what if I need to say something more, what if I need to change it, right? And like that's very real and valid, but also part of being a writer is knowing that you can always like you can write the same poem again in a different way. Like the poem, this was a big part, oh my god, for me, of just growing, because I came up in like the slam spoken word scene, and it was a big part for me of just being like, you know, as a teenager, it was like, okay, this is my poem about being Jewish, this is my poem about being bisexual, this is my poem about rape, right? And like that, these are the poems that I don't know what I'm gonna do when I run out of topics, you know, and the kind of hubris that I had as a 15-year-old to think like that's the only thing I have to say on the topic, like this is all I'm ever going to be able to say about God, right? Is silly. Like there's always another poem, you can always come at it from a different direction, and knowing that means it's easier for me to walk away from drafts and be like, okay, that's it for now, but if I have another idea about this from a different angle, then I'll write it then, you know? So I think saying that like you can always write another poem, you know, there might be things that you want to change, but you change them in the future. Okay.
Facts.
I think we'll do Tali's question. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. As our last question, we can kind of wrap up. I think this is one that we haven't really touched on. Is it worth spending money on press that will format your book for you if you don't know how to do that?
For me personally, I would rather pay. Okay, multifaceted answer. If I know someone who could help me format it, I would rather pay someone in my community than pay a press. Depends on what the press is. I'm just generally distrustful of organizations.
Yeah.
And if I could pay an artist in my community, like right now, I'm working with a graphic designer for a new Give Space icon. And I was like, I want to work with a single entity, a freelance artist, because I want to give my funds to a person. Like I want that to go there. But then again, if you're working with a press, like not a cult, then that's completely different, because I trust that group. But yeah, Bree, do you want to speak on this? Because
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so is it worth spending on a press that will format your book for you if you don't know how to do that? I think that sounds like a vanity press where, you know, it is the kind of like, hey, give us $500 and, you know, we'll make a book for you. And I'd say that like you're young, you know, and you have free time, and like just learn how to do it yourself. Honestly, like there's a lot of workshops and tutorials online, and I think having like a real material understanding of what it means to like really put a book together will only help your writing. I remember, you know, when I was in high school, I would put together these zines, you know, and I wouldn't even like go through Lulu or anything. I would literally be like, you know, making collages and then scanning in the collages and then photocopying them and like learning, you know, how the pages go together so they print out correctly, and then stapling all of it. And that really helped me just like, you know, take pride in my work and also think about how the poems are going together.
yeah.
So I'd say like learn how to do it yourself within like a real publisher, like not a vanity press, but like an actual publisher, you know. like Isabella was talking earlier about like I think like royalties and breakdown and like what it means to like be in complete control of your own writing versus working with a larger press. And like you know, with a real press, with I don't want to say real press, self-publishing is real, but you know, with a traditional press, with an indie press, you are not keeping 100% of the profit, right? Because other people have to get paid. But like the, you know, 90%, 80% of income, you know, or profit, right, that you're not getting, that's just going to making your book better. You know, that's going to pay the illustrator, that's going to pay the proofreaders and fact checkers, that's going to pay the marketing team, you know, and to make sure that the book gets out and gets read by people. And like that kind of infrastructure is really important to me, and to, you know, the success of your book, you know. So you're not making 100% of the proceeds, but like your book will, you know, generally have a wider reach, and more of a foundation. So I would say no, it's not worth spending on a press because it sounds like a scam.
But I also too, like, I don't know the specific details of that press. So if you feel like it is an intuition and it is a calling to maybe try that out, then I'm not going to say don't try it out, but also just be aware of the other options.
Yeah.
That's it. That is all.
Okay, thank you. Those are great answers. These were all great answers and great questions. So shout out to everyone in the chat. You guys
I know.
really cared. And thank you both so much. Seriously, you guys, I feel like we could do this for literally hours because you guys
I know, right?
so full of knowledge, but also like so easy to.
Yes. Okay, I'm just gonna boost our books again in the chat.
I also wanted to shout out, someone put about some new poetry zines have popped up on Instagram, and there are some Zoom open mics. I know the Clementine zine on Instagram, just regular ones, since I know that was a topic we were talking about. So
Yeah.
feel free, if you guys have any other additional resources, to drop in the chat. But otherwise, thank you both so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to come by. Also, just a little plug, we're taking a break tomorrow on the panel, but Friday we will be back for full-time creative careers, so please feel free to join for that as well. And yeah, thank you both again so much.
Thank you. I'm also going to plug, if you want to hear me and Isabella talking more about poems, we were both teaching workshops for Not a Cult on their YouTube channel over the summer. So I just put that channel in the description. There's in the chat, and there's a bunch of other great poets teaching great workshops. So
yeah,
lots to discuss, lots to think about. Thank you so much for having us. This was so fun.
Beautiful.